Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Shalom. I'm David Mencer, Israeli government spokesman. A short update from me and then to your questions. It's Wednesday, the 17th of July, day 285 of the October 7th war. On our hostages, yesterday, families of 5 young female hostages showed pictures of their children taken during the early days of their captivity, bruised, bandaged, lying on mattresses on the floor in Hamas captivity. Agam Berger, Daniela Gilboa, Liri Albag, Naama Levy and Karina Ariev, all aged 19 or 20 years old, beaten, bruised and wounded from their horrific abduction. 120 of them, men, women, children, the elderly, Israelis, but also from 24 nations. Horrific abuse. 9 months now. Look at them, please. Say their names with me. Agam Berger, Daniela Gilboa, Liri Albag, Naama Levy and Karina Ariev. 285 days. 120 need to be freed. The sheer cruelty of Hamas, their crimes against humanity, continue to this very day. Israel will not rest until they are all brought home. Hamas will be destroyed together with their terrorist threat to Israel, and we will return our residents securely to their homes in the south and the north. On the hostage release deal, as the Prime Minister has said, Hamas are under pressure. The pressure is increasing precisely because we are striking them. We are targeting its senior commanders and eliminating thousands of terrorists. It's under pressure because we are standing steadfast on our just demands despite all the international pressure. This is exactly the time to increase the pressure even more in order to return them home, all of the hostages, the living and those that have been murdered by Hamas, and to achieve all of our objectives in this war. We will increase the pressure on Hamas, and we will return everyone home. The hostages of October 7th, as well as those taken before, Oron Shol and Hadar Goldin and Avera Menginustu and Hisham al-Sayed. On the deal, negotiations on the deal are ongoing. They continue. The framework agreed upon by Israel has been supported by President Biden. Israel's aim is to return hostages without obstructing the other goals of the war. In the negotiations, Israel insists upon these basic demands. First, the option to return to fighting until all the goals of the war are met, the prevention of smuggling ammunition from Egypt into Gaza, preventing the return of thousands of armed terrorists to the north of Gaza Strip, and of course maximizing the number of living hostages that return from Hamas captivity. Israel's Defense Minister Yoav Gallant told US Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin in the last few hours that the IDF operations in Gaza have led to the conditions necessary to achieve an agreement for the return of hostages, which is the highest moral imperative at this time. So, on the war against Hamas, in the last 9 months, since the ground operation started, in Gaza, here is an update on our latest figures. Half of the leadership of Hamas's military wing have been eliminated. Approximately 14,000 terrorists eliminated or apprehended. Among the eliminated terrorists, 6 brigade commanders, more than 20 battalion commanders, 150 company commanders, all with precise intelligence. Half of the leadership of Hamas's military wing has been eliminated through strikes and eliminations, and all the while the incredibly brave IDF, with the help of the good Lord himself, continues its crucial mission to pursue the top leaders of Hamas. One by one, they are being taken down to dismantle Hamas's capabilities. IDF has struck 37,000 targets from the air within Gaza. More than 1,000 terrorist infrastructure and launch sites have been destroyed. IDF have focused efforts on locating terrorists embedded in hospitals, in schools, in UNRWA schools, in humanitarian shelters. Hamas used them as hiding places and bases for terror. But Israel has made clear that striking Hamas operatives making use of civilian infrastructure makes the site a legitimate military target under international law to prevent the restoration of terrorist organizations' capabilities. Above and below ground, the IDF have dismantled dozens of production sites and workshops, as well as offensive and strategic underground tunnel routes. Hamas is being taken apart slowly, systematically, and deliberately. Now an update from COGAT in their work coordinating aid into Gaza. Over the last 24 hours, 206 aid trucks were transferred into Gaza. Trucks from Egypt, Jordan and Israel have entered via Kerem Shalom and Erez, as well as a convoy that entered via Gate 96. 6 tankers of cooking gas were transferred into Gaza. And today, Kerem Shalom, which as you know is the main humanitarian aid crossing into Gaza, came under Hamas fire. Hamas are actually firing at the point where the aid comes in. It's clear that Hamas will do literally anything to prevent the aid from reaching the people of Gaza. So since the beginning of this war, over 41,200 trucks delivering more than 780,000 tons of humanitarian aid have entered Gaza. That's more food and aid enters Gaza Strip every single day, more than enough food to feed all the people there. 80% of food, 80% more food compared to before October the 7th. Now, the UN, of course, should divert its efforts from its mechanical, systematic condemnation of Israel and instead divert their energy to sending more trucks and forklift trucks to get the aid to ordinary Gazans. But unfortunately, Gazans shouldn't hold their breaths because UNRWA has been infiltrated by terrorists. The facilities of the UN agency in Gaza provide cover for Hamas and Palestinian Islamic Jihad. Many of its employees are terrorists. Israel has provided UNRWA with a list of over 100 of its staff, and there are many, many more who have been identified as terror operatives. But UNRWA in Gaza is unfortunately unfixable. Countries should stop funding it with their taxpayers' hard-earned money and divert it to reliable humanitarian organizations without links to terrorism. So that's the end of our briefing today. I will now take your questions, which you should put in the chat together with your news outlet. Okay, first question here is from Joel Pollack at Breitbart News. Former President Trump reposted the Prime Minister Netanyahu's message after the assassination attempt. Is this a sign of renewed warmth between the two? Thank you for that question, Joel. Of course, the relationship between the US and Israel is a bipartisan one, and that is extremely important for Israel, and that will be shown by Democrats and Republicans at the Prime Minister's speech next week at Congress in Washington, D.C. But of course, none of us here in Israel can forget the incredible contribution that President Trump has made to this country in moving the US Embassy from Tel Aviv to its rightful place in our eternal capital of Jerusalem, the incredible achievements of the Abraham Accords, which President Trump championed, without whom the incredible achievements could not have happened. So the links between President Trump, former President Trump, and Israel are, of course, well known, and we look forward to the Prime Minister's trip to the US and also meeting Congress people and politicians from across the aisle, both sides of the Congress. Next question is also from Joel Pollack. The US Treasury recently admitted it sanctioned the wrong Israeli. What does that say about the sanctions in general? Yes, thank you very much for that question, Joel. We here in Israel believe that those measures are completely unnecessary. Israel has robust law and order judiciary practices in place already to deal with any wrongdoing from wherever it comes from. We have our internal justice system, which works extremely efficiently, and we've said from the outset that there is literally no need for these sorts of actions. We think they're unwarranted and they're also unwise, and in this case, as I've seen in reports as well, they've been shown to be wrong as well. Next question is from Joel Pollock. Is Israel advising any security precautions abroad in anticipation of the Paris Olympics? Thank you for that question, Joel. Yes, of course. The dramatic rise in anti-Semitism abroad, the scenes that we've seen of hundreds of thousands of people marching in support of Hamas abroad will all have been factored in to provide the appropriate level of security for our Olympians in Paris, but also for other Israelis visiting for the Olympics and the wider Israeli Olympic team. Next question is from Miss Vasdal from TV2 Norway. First question, you've got three questions here. The first question is, how is Netanyahu preparing for the visit to Washington next week? What will be the most important to achieve in the meetings with Biden? Thank you very much for that question, Ms. Vidal. Let me just say on Norway, I've seen reports of the Norwegian foreign minister wanting to visit Israel, and for that to have been not welcomed by our own foreign ministry. You know, Norway is one of the countries that has, in the midst of this war, in the aftermath of the October 7th massacre, it saw fit to erroneously recognize a Palestinian state. I don't think to this day they have condemned Hamas. So to Norwegians and the government of Norway, particularly, not to the Norwegian people, but to the government of Norway, we say this loud and clear. You know, Norway, we've got enough local Jew haters in Hamas, in Gaza. We don't need to import their supporters from abroad. That said, your question, the Prime Minister is, of course, preparing for his visit to the US, where he will meet leaders in the United States. The close relationship between the US and Israel, the fact that we have shared enemies, but not only shared enemies in Iran, but also the shared values that we share, that we have, of democracy, of freedom, of liberty. Those are the things which bind our two nations together. Our enemies, like Iran, they of course call us the little Satan, but they call the US the great Satan, and they include in that other democracies as well. What will be the most important? You ask about the meetings with President Biden. The Prime Minister's schedule hasn't come out yet. It will be coming out very, very shortly ahead of the trip, and we'll be able to share who our Prime Minister is meeting in the US. But in deepening that relationship, I think, is the most important aspect of this visit. The next question you ask is, the US recently criticized Israel for the number of civilian deaths in Gaza. How come there is still bombing of what the UN claims to be UNRWA schools? Thank you very much for that question. I saw the Matt Miller at the State Department's comments talking about civilian deaths. Of course, every single civilian death is a tragedy, but it's a key part of Hamas's strategy to embed themselves. In fact, I would say quite clearly, and we know this for a fact, that Hamas would like 10 times more Gazan civilians to have been killed. 10 times. Now, the facts are this. You haven't included it in your question. These UNRWA schools are used by Hamas and Islamic Jihad to take shelter. They specifically embed themselves into areas where there are civilians. That is a key part of their strategy. Even the leadership of the Palestinian Authority, even them say that Hamas, they criticize Hamas, not for the October 7th massacre, but from fighting within the Palestinian, within Palestine amongst ordinary Gazans. And I made clear in this briefing that Israeli army going after these terrorists in order to stop them from committing terrorist acts is legitimate under international law. We will always make up-teen efforts to ensure that Gazan civilians are moved out of harm's way whenever possible. That's been a key war aim, and that is the reason why after this war it will be shown that the number of the terrorists to Gazan civilian ratio is lower than in any similar urban warfare combat war that there has ever been. We believe it's as low as 1 to 1. The UN average is closer to 1 to 8. So I think you should correct that misnomer that we're targeting UNRWA schools. We're targeting Hamas terrorists in civilian areas, and they are legitimate targets. Every civilian death is a tragedy, but it is the responsibility for those for Gazan, ordinary Gazans' death, fall at the feet squarely of Hamas. Third question from TV2 Norway is, what is Hamas's capabilities after the successful elimination of Rafah Salama? Any news on Mohammed Daif? Thank you for those two questions. I've made clear earlier in my briefing our assessment of Hamas's capabilities. We're continuing to go after them. We have smashed the 24 battalions. Many in the West, including in Norway, told us that we should not go into Rafah, that we should not go into Khan Yunis, that we should not go after Hamas, but we are smashing them piece by piece, deliberately, systematically. We're going after these terrorists, and no one should be any in doubt that given half a chance they will regroup. But the only reason that we are making success with these hostage release negotiations is precisely because of the unrelenting military pressure being put on the neck of Hamas. These are murderers. They are murderers, filthy, filthy murderers, but we're going after them, and we won't rest until Hamas is defeated militarily and their governmental strategies. We bring all of our hostages home, and of course we ensure that Gaza can never be a threat to Israel again. Next question is from David Clement from the News Forum. Human Rights Watch has released a report confirming that Hamas and affiliated fighters committed war crimes and crimes against humanity. Human Rights Watch has regularly been critical of Israel and the IDF. Does the Prime Minister's office have a response to that report? Thank you very much, David, for that question. Israel did not need the Human Rights Watch report. We had the video footage, the live stream GoPro video footage, which Hamas themselves filmed, of the rapes, of the beheading, of the burning of families alive, of the mutilations, of the terrible horrors that have not been meted against the Jewish people since the time of the Holocaust. This was the largest day of Jew killing since the end of the Second World War. And that is why we do not need any reports from anywhere else to tell us that what Hamas did was a breach of international law. We've got the video footage to prove it, for heaven's sake. And it's welcome that some of these pseudo NGOs are now admitting that there was human rights abuse as well. For heaven's sake, we've been seeing these things for we've been reporting these things for 9 months now. Hamas are enemies of civilization. We're on the front line of this battle, and we will defeat them. Next question is from Jim Williams from Zenga. Yesterday, the State Department press briefing, Matt Miller, and the White House briefing with Karine Jean-Pierre both emphasized that silence should not be interpreted as a lack of progress in the hostage ceasefire talks. Miller mentioned that CIA Director Bill Burns and representatives from Israel, Qatar, Egypt, and Hamas are engaged in round-the-clock discussions to secure the hostages' release. Is this consistent with the information coming out of the Prime Minister's office? Thank you very much for that question, Jim. Throughout this hostage release negotiations, there are two things which are clear. Number one, it's been Hamas that have walked away every single time. Why are they not walking away now? It's because of the sustained military pressure. The Prime Minister has made clear just in the last few minutes in his speaking to the Knesset, our parliament, whereas in the past Hamas have been adamant and not bent, our military pressure has forced them to bend. Look, we've been here many, many times before, unfortunately. We've tried our hardest. It's in front of our eyes every single moment of the day to get our hostages home. That's all we think about. It's the key war objectives to bring our people home. But we know that this pressure is having an effect on Hamas. The second thing is that, with permission, Jim, and you'll forgive me, we're not giving a running commentary on the status of these negotiations because lives literally hang in the balance. So you'll forgive me for not giving you the ins and the outs of every single thing which has happened. But within this briefing I've just given you, I've given you a pretty comprehensive statement of the current status quo and Israel's position. Next. From another question from Joel Pollock. Does the Trump post reflect warming of relations with Netanyahu after a chill? Thank you very much for that question, Joel. Look, I've made clear in my previous answer to this rephrased same question is that Israelis and the Prime Minister remember very, very well the incredible support which President Trump, while he was in office, gave to this country. And I talked about the Abraham Accords, which were absolutely unprecedented and still remain the basis for future negotiations with other Arab states, notably Saudi Arabia. So we remain extremely grateful for that fact. And of course, moving our embassy from Tel Aviv to its rightful place, moving the US embassy from its rightful place, moving it to Jerusalem, the eternal capital of this people. Many presidents in the past promised to do it. It was President Trump that did it. Now, that being said, the US is already very firmly in its election season, and as a government spokesman, I will say this again, that Israel's relationship with the US is a bipartisan relationship. We have strong support from across both sides, and that's something which is very, very important to us. But of course, none of us here remember the incredible support during this war as well that former President Trump has made for Israel. Number two, you ask, is Israel concerned about security? Oh, yes. So these are questions which you've already asked. Okay. Next question from Hannah Julian from the Jewish Press. Last night, Hezbollah fired dozens of missiles into Kiryat Shmona, Meron, and Nahariya. The war of attrition continues, and Israel likewise continues to chip away at Hezbollah's resources in southern Lebanon. Are there any other diplomatic options left in pursuit of a resolution in the north? And if so, what might they be? If not, what's stopping Israel from ending this war of attrition? Thank you very much for that question. Hannah, look, you say that we're chipping away. We are not chipping away, Hannah, if I may correct you. Hezbollah is receiving massive blows from this country. And we're going to continue to operate against Hezbollah aggression. We're going to use all means necessary to restore the security to our northern border and to safely return our citizens home. We hold the state of Lebanon and Hezbollah and the Hezbollah terrorist organization, which we know is operating under the guidance of Iran and bears full responsibility for the deterioration of the security situation in the north in violation of UN Security Council resolutions 1559 and 1701. One way or another, the Prime Minister has been very, very clear, one way or another, Hezbollah will be pushed back from our northern border, whether it's diplomatically or militarily, one way or another, it will happen. We won't rest until this threat from Iran is pushed back. Thank you. Next question is from Joel. Joel at Breitbart. Will Netanyahu meet Trump in the US visit? Thank you for that question, Joel. The Prime Minister's itinerary will be, the broad aspects of the Prime Minister's itinerary will be released before the visit, and we'll be making clear all of the relevant meetings we have to share with the public at that time. Now is not the time to share those, but they'll be made clear in due course. And there was another question from Joel Pollack also regarding sanctions targeting the wrong Israeli. Yeah, no, I think I answered that question. Can you just scroll up to the top slowly so I can see if we've missed any other questions? No, I think that was the last question. So with that, can I thank you all for joining us here today. We'll have another briefing for you tomorrow at the same time. In the meantime, do please stay safe, and thank you for joining me.